Okay, good morning, good morning, good evening. It feels like morning. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for waiting. We had something put ahead of the public meetings that really were scheduled for 6:30, so thank you very much for your patience. Note to members of the public that all cell phones, pagers, and PDAs should be turned off. Additionally, for your information, please be advised that we are audio-video recording this meeting. So this is meeting number 9, Monday, November 11th, which has now been switched to Wednesday, November the 13th, still supposedly at 6:30. My name is Cheryl Ganan, and I will be chairing this meeting tonight, including the public meetings that come first. Are there any changes in order of items on the agenda, members of committee? Okay. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest and or conflict of interest? Okay, seeing none, then we will move into the public meetings. So there are 3 public meetings under the Planning Act, the first one being a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application for a garden suite as a temporary use submitted by Heather Thomason. The Planning Act requires in Section 34, subsection 12, that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, Council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Heather Thomason. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment, and any comments received will be taken into account by Council in their consideration. The Planning Act requires in Section 34, subsection 14.1, that Council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of Council for the Township of West Lincoln to the Ontario Municipal Board. Would the Deputy Clerk advise of the method and dates by which notice of the public meeting was given?
Proper notice was given by way of public notice sent out on October 8th, 2019. Additionally, a yellow sign was posted on the subject property. Notice was provided on the Township's website and posted in the Township office lobby.
Okay, thank you. Well, Planner 1, Alexa Cooper, please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed revisions to the draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment for Heather Thomason. Ms. Cooper.
This is just for a temporary use rezoning for Heather Thomason. I think that's the one for Dunlow?
This is not my wording. Okay, well, so there is an error there, so we can change that.
Elsa, if you wouldn't just mind putting the drawing up on the screen.
It's not coming up.
It's not? Okay.
It's coming up here, but it's not projected.
Okay, so we have it. Unfortunately,
Okay.
it's not there.
Well, there are reports with the attachment at the desk if anybody needs to take a look at it. An application for a temporary use bylaw to permit a garden suite has been submitted for 6925 Regional Road 20. The garden suite provisions of the Planning Act and the Township's official plan permit secondary residential units on the parcel of land to assist with the needs of a family. A specific number of years was not provided in the application by the applicant, so staff are suggesting that the application be evaluated for a temporary use period of 10 years, which is the maximum they can be provided with. If the temporary use is required for more than 10 years, the applicant can apply to extend the temporary use by 3 years continually before the temporary use expires. The garden suite is not intended to be a rental unit and will be removed once no longer required by the family. A $5,000 security deposit will be obtained as part of the site plan process. This deposit will be held by the township until the temporary structure has been removed from the property. The township departments were circulated and had no objection to the rezoning as proposed, and no written public comments have been received to date. A future staff report will provide a recommendation to the Planning, Building, Environmental Committee following tonight's meeting. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So, Ms. Thomas, do either you or your daughter want to say anything further to that application, or do you feel that that has been explained well enough?
I think it's good.
Okay, this was your opportunity if you wanted to say anything further, so that's, no, you're good? Okay, great.
I have one question.
Okay.
The provincial plans outlines 20 years temporary use, and that's what we understood from the beginning of the process.
Okay, so it is a little different. We'll go to Mr. Treble, but this can be 10, and then you can have extensions of 3-year periods. I think that's the way we go. Mr. Treble, would you like to speak further to that?
Yeah, just to, I guess, clarify, the Planning Act gives us authority to go up to 20 years, but our official plan is at 10. So based on the official plan, we are to stick with 10 years and do renewals of 3 years subsequent each time. So we at some point could amend the official plan to change it to 20 or any variation up to 20. We have the authority to be more restrictive than policy, but not less restrictive. So I don't know whether it was an intent to leave it at 10 or whether it's just something that's never been updated. I can't really answer that piece of the puzzle, but right now we can only do 10 based on our current policy.
Okay, and we are aware, though, of extensions being put on. We have just done that recently for other situations, so.
What I noticed, Councilor Gavan, is that as we prepare to do this, reading the provincial suggestion that we make it more affordable for seniors to accommodate, and this is why I'm doing this, moving back to the home farm. It's just that fees are coming up that I didn't expect, like for the $8,000 that's going to cost me. I expected that, around $8,000, excuse me. I'm not exactly sure that it's 8 is close to. Now that $5,000 has been added on, plus every 3 years that application has a fee with it, and that's why I thought at 20 years for the $2,300 that I'm paying right now, I felt that that was worthwhile, and it's getting a little bit onerous, the fees.
Okay. So at this point in time, of course, we can't do anything about that, but that certainly is something that this committee may need to look at, because certainly, again, one of the things, as you've pointed out, is that we're really looking at affordability for seniors and keeping families together. So that probably is something that down the road should be looked at. So thank you for that input. But okay. So I would like to ask now if there are any oral or written submissions for this from anybody present in the audience. Any members of the public have a question about this? And seeing none, then members of committee. Is there anyone with a question or a comment? Okay. So moving on then, please be advised that a technical report is being considered by committee this evening, and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future planning committee and or council meeting. Please be advised that once the planning committee and or council has made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. There's an attendance sign-in sheet which is located on the table near the exit doors, which we would ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when you are signing the attendance sheet for this evening's committee meeting, that you place a check mark in the column marked Thomason if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and or decisions on this matter. Therefore, people who are interested in observing council and or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend the meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township's website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at a council and or committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-up sheet. So this public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is concluded at the hour of 7:01. Thank you. Okay, so the second public meeting this evening is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment application submitted by Adele Akers, Ron Vermeyer, agent. The Planning Act requires in Section 34, subsection 12, that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment, council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendment. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendment, and any comments received will be taken into account by council in their consideration. The Planning Act requires through Section 34, subsection 13, that council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of council for the Township of West Lincoln to the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal, or LPAT. Would the Deputy Clerk please advise of the method and dates by which notice of this public meeting was given?
Proper notice was sent out on October 8th, 2019. Additionally, a yellow sign was posted on the subject property. Notice was provided on the township's website and posted in township office lobby.
Okay, thank you. Will Planner 1, Alexa Cooper, please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for Adele Acres?
The application for rezoning has been submitted for the property municipally known as 9547 South Chippewa Road. The rezoning application is required as a condition of consent for surplus severance application B13 2019 WL, which was conditionally approved by the Committee of Adjustment on October 30th, 2019. The severed residential lot is proposed to be rezoned to a rural residential zone with no site-specific exception. There is a 9 square meter shed on the property that will need to be relocated to conform with their zoning provisions. The retained agricultural lot is proposed to be rezoned to agricultural purposes only with no site-specific exception, which will preclude any residential development in perpetuity. The township's departments have no objections to the application as proposed. The region and MPCA commented on the rezoning through the original severance application and have no objection to the rezoning as proposed either. No written public comments have been received in regards to this application to date, and again, a future staff report will provide a recommendation to the Planning, Building, Environment Committee following tonight's meeting.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant and/or agent here and wishing to speak? Would you like to speak any further to that application? No, you're fine? Presented well enough for you? Okay, great, thank you. So, are there any members of the public who wish to speak to this application this evening? Okay, I would like to stress that this may be the only public meeting held with respect to this application. Therefore, if any members of the public would like to make comments or provide written comments, they should state them or present them now, as the LPAT may not consider comments made during any other council and/or committee meeting. Also, anyone wishing to speak is required to come forward to the microphone at the table and provide their name. So one last chance if there's anyone wishing to speak to this. Okay, so now are there any members of committee who have any oral or written submissions on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment? Again, please note that members of the committee must make their comments now, as the LPAT may not consider comments made during a planning, building, environmental meeting and/or any other council or committee meetings. So members of committee? Okay, seeing none. Please be advised that a technical report is being considered by committee this evening and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future planning committee and/or council meeting. Please be advised that once the planning committee and/or council has made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw amendment, and if approved by council, a notice of its passing will be circulated with an appeal period. There's an attendance sign-in sheet which is located on the table near the exit doors that we would ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when signing the attendance sheet for this evening's committee meeting that you place a check mark in the column marked Adele Acres if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and/or decisions on this matter. Therefore, people who are interested in observing council and/or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend the meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township's website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at a council and/or committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-up sheet. This public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw amendment is concluded at the hour of 7:06 p.m. Okay. Okay. The third meeting this evening under the Planning Act is a public meeting to consider a zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment application submitted by the Township of West Lincoln with respect to winery, brewery, and special occasion regulations. The Planning Act requires in Section 34, subsection 12, and Section 17, subsection 15, that before passing a zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment, Council must hold at least one public meeting for the purpose of informing the public in respect of the amendments. The purpose of this public meeting is to receive comments and answer questions from the public regarding the amendment to the Township of West Lincoln zoning bylaw and official plan. We stress that at this point, no decision has been made on the proposed amendments, and any comments received will be taken into account by Council in their consideration. The Planning Act requires through Section 34, subsection 13, and under Ontario Regulation 543-06, that Council advise the public that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Township of West Lincoln before the bylaw is passed, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the Township of West Lincoln to the local planning appeals tribunal. Would the Deputy Clerk please advise of the method and dates by which notice of this public meeting was given?
Proper notice was given by way of advertising in a newspaper with general circulation on October 10th, 2019, and was posted on the Township's website.
Thank you. Will Director of Planning and Building, Brian Trevel, please explain the purpose and reason for the proposed zoning bylaw and official plan amendment with respect to winery, brewery, and special occasion regulations? Mr. Trevel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're switching gears just a little bit. This is an application that's actually initiated by the townships, or the township, I should say. Staff presented a report in June that talked about taking a lead in putting some agricultural policies in to accommodate wineries and breweries and distilleries, as well as special occasion permits. And so part of that process requires that we hold a public meeting, and hence the reason for tonight's session. Our current official plan has policies that talk about your traditional agricultural uses, your cash cropping, your livestock operations, etc. And it also has provisions with respect to what are considered agriculturally related uses and on-farm diversified uses. But some areas, such as Niagara region, Prince Edward County, the Peely area, Point Peely area, they have additional policy sets with respect to these various topics, wineries, breweries, and distilleries and whatnot. And so we've decided to be somewhat proactive and incorporate those into our official plan and zoning bylaw. Not that we have a lot of people knocking on our door or knocking down our door yet, but as varieties of grapes and other things like hops and stuff become a little more prevalent, the day could very well come when we have farmers interested in these types of operations. So rather than doing a one-off, which is what we did in 2013 to accommodate Domaine Calis or Calis at the time, as I said, I'd like to be a little more proactive. So there's a draft set of policies that are included in the report tonight. They are still draft, in very much a draft form. We're looking for input from the public, basically. Agency review is yet to occur. By the time we do a recommendation report, I'll have had some agency input. I've reached out to the Federation of Agriculture. I've reached out to the Ministry of Agriculture. And I've reached out to some of the other regions, such as Prince Edward County as well, just to get a sense of what their policy sets look like and what we can do. And I'm working in tandem with the region on the draft policies. The other thing I can mention, Madam Chair, is that I have spoken to two individuals who would have been here on Monday night but weren't able to be here tonight. There is, I know, at least one gentleman in the audience who I believe wants to speak to what we're attempting to do here. But Regional Councillor Albert Woodavine and I had an extensive discussion last Friday, sorry. But he's at a meeting, I think, down in Grimsby tonight to do with the regional official plan. And also Mr. Rob Cosby and I have had discussions as well. But he is not able to be here tonight due to other commitments as well. So there is some interest in the community about this. And you know, I want to do the policy set properly. That's why I'd like to have this public process done, so that when I get my final consultation with the agencies finished, then we can come back into a recommendation report. And if the region's on board with our draft policy set at that point, there should be a way that actually our final decision here at Council is the final decision, and we don't have to go to the region and wait for approval based on some of the new regional approval language for exemptions. So, Madam Chair, I don't really have a whole lot more to say at this point, except that this is the opportunity for the public to have input into our draft agricultural policies, or to add to them if there's pieces that are missing or extra pieces that we should look at.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Treble. So, as Mr. Treble said, this is an opportunity for public submissions. Are there any oral or written submissions from anyone present regarding the proposed zoning bylaw and an official plan amendment? I would like to stress that this may be the only public meeting held with respect to this application. Therefore, if any members of the public would like to make comments and or provide written comments, they should state them or present them now, as the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal, or LPAT, may not consider comments made during any other council or committee meeting. Also, anyone wishing to speak is required to come forward to the microphone at the table and provide his name and address for the record prior to speaking. And okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is John Nadeau. I'm from Domaine Kilus, actually, and that's at 3651 16 Road in St. Anne's.
Thank you, Mr. Nadeau. Go ahead.
I just was reviewing the draft here, and there's a few things that sort of jumped out. That a lot of what is in here it seems to have been the way it was, and many of these issues regarding the acreage that's required in order to have a winery license, to have retail, the grapes that can be grown, how the usage of the amount of grapes that have to be grown locally, what is locally, all of those things are sort of governed by the AGCO regulations on wineries. The grape growing is the grape growers, as well as the VQA, the Vintners Quality Alliance, as well as there's a few things where it says, you know, that all wine has to be bottled on site. A little bit more specific that bottling lines now have become quite obsolete, and now it's mobile bottling trucks that will come to the property, again governed by regulations with Vintners Quality Alliance as well as the AGCO, and how that's done, the amount of wine that needs to be fermented on site as opposed to bought from other sources. So I think that, and I'd be happy to offer these and the direction on where to find these, but you know, this has been thought of before with quite a bit of success in the Niagara region. I think that West Lincoln has an offering that's a little bit more, a little different because of the soils that exist up here. But we can use another sort of way of having, being compliant with the AGCO by the minimum acreage of vines planted on the property to have retail, but also source some great grapes from Ontario and especially from Niagara to complement what can't be grown up here, so that you can create a tourist destination as well here, and that West Lincoln perhaps will end up more like a Prince Edward County that produce very little of their own grapes, buy a lot of grapes from Niagara, but have created the industry, the wine industry as it exists in Prince Edward County, by doing exactly that, bringing in grapes from Niagara. We can do it just from below, and that we can probably, with economic development putting behind this, developed our own sub-wine region in West Lincoln, attracting, I think, many other participants.
Okay, thank you. So I'm sure that you will have many a conversation with our Director of Planning, and I'm sure that he'll appreciate that input. Is there anything further you wish to say?
No, it's just, I think that it covers it. It's just that there's some amendments to this, but I'm sure that that'll come down the road.
I'm sure. Okay. Thank you very much for.
Well, thank you for having me here. Thank you.
Okay. So are there any members of committee who have any oral or written submissions on the proposed zoning bylaw and official plan amendment? Please note that members of the committee must make their comments now, as the Local Planning Appeals Tribunal, or LPAT, may not consider comments made during the planning, building, environmental meeting or any other council or committee meeting. So your chance to ask questions or make comments. Mayor Belsma.
And Just to further, I think that this is a great opportunity to kind of put our West Lincoln stamp on it. We understand that we don't have some of those microclimates that people in Lincoln have available to them, you know, namely the bench and some of those perks, I guess. But at the same time, and I always want to promote the fact that what we don't have is easily compensated by what we do have, and we have an opportunity here not only for a budding winery business, but also I think we may have available to us hop growing, and so I'm glad that the language includes distilleries and wineries, because I think, you know, we cash crop, and I understand that there's very popular liquors and that are made from rye and wheat, and so you know, we may become so the language is broad and allows us to make a kind of a made in West Lincoln version of what is probably in Niagara Lake and Lincoln. So I'm looking forward to seeing the final and go through the process.
Good, thank you. Anyone further? Okay, so please be advised that a technical report is being considered by the Planning Committee this evening, and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future Planning Committee and or Council meeting. Please be advised that once the Planning Committee and or Council have made a decision with respect to the zoning bylaw and official plan amendment, and if approved by Council, a notice of their passing will be circulated with an appeal period. There's an attendance sign-in sheet, which is located on the table near the exit doors, which we would ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when signing the attendance sheet for this evening's council meeting that you place a check mark in the column marked Winery and Brewery Regulations if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and or decisions on this matter. Therefore, people who are interested in observing council and or committee discussions about a particular bylaw should not solely rely on mailed notices and thus miss the opportunity to attend the meetings. It is suggested that you watch the township's website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at a council and or committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the website for the public to view. If you wish to receive notices by email, it is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-in sheet. This public meeting with respect to the proposed zoning bylaw and official plan amendment is concluded at the hour of 7:20. And so although I said that we have 3 public meetings under the Planning Act, we still continue with our public meetings. This public meeting is being held in accordance with the Municipal Act SO 2001, Chapter 25, in the Township of West Lincoln's procedural bylaw and street naming policy, being policy POL-PD-01-11. The Township of West Lincoln's procedural bylaw states that any matter pertaining to the naming of a highway and or private road in a plan of subdivision or plan of condominium for which notice is, shall be published at least once, the date of the publication being at least 7 days prior to the council meeting indicated in the notice. Public notice of this meeting was given through advertising in the township's administration building, on the township's website, and in a newspaper with general circulation dated October 3rd, 2019. The purpose of this evening's public meeting is to inform the public of council's intent and to receive comments regarding the naming of Sunset Acres Plan of Condominium. A bylaw will be passed at a later date to officially name Sunset Acres Plan of Condominium. Will the Director of Planning and Building, Mr. Brian Treble, please explain the Planning Staff Report number PD-173-19 regarding the naming of the street for Sunset Acres Plan of Condominium?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems like a planning meeting would not be complete without a street naming discussion on it these days. So in accordance with the procedural bylaw for the township, a public meeting is required in order to name a street. In fact, when it's a private street, the Municipal Act also requires that we hold a public meeting. This is a proposal for a plan of condominium on Regional Road 12, Grimsby Mountain Road, that was approved a few months ago by committee. The applicant is working through the conditions of the draft plan of condominium. Site plan approval has been achieved, and I believe the applicant is holding hope that he can start establishing the road at some point this year. And part of the process in order to achieve the plan of condominium is clearing conditions, and one of the conditions requires that the street be named to the satisfaction of council and a bylaw be passed. So that's the reason for this discussion. The street naming policy that the township developed several years ago requires that at least one of the names be taken from a list of approved names, and the list of approved names shows up on page 70 of 346 in the agenda. The proposed name is not on that list, but in keeping with the theme of the plan of condos, Sunset Acres, they've proposed the name Sunset Place. Our fire chief has looked at and cleared the name as compliant with the 911 requirements, and likewise regional staff have also looked at the name and cleared it as being compliant with 911 requirements. So this name is appropriate for consideration, subject to council generally being in agreement, and depending on what we hear tonight through this public process. So I'll maybe end it there, Madam Chair, but I can answer questions if any.
Okay, thank you. Are the applicants, would you like to speak to that further? So please come forward to the microphone.
Good evening. I'm Julia Redfern with IBI Group, the agent on behalf of the owners Fred and Joyce Boscher. We are proposing the street name of Sunset Place for a new condominium road that will be located at 2942 and 2946 Grimsby Road in the hamlet referred to as Regional Road 12. On your screens, you will see the rendered site plan of the conditionally approved plan of condominium. There are 4 proposed residential lots, a condominium road, and an existing commercial business. We have reviewed the approved street naming list and associated street name policy provided by the municipality. However, none of the options were desirable to the owners as they did not accurately capture the neighborhood character. Alternatively, the owners are proposing to name the street Sunset Place to highlight the neighborhood attributes, particularly the stunning sunsets in the west. The proposed street name is not meant to represent a name or animal that has a personal connection to the owner. As Brian mentioned, the township planning staff and fire staff, as well as staff from the region, have all been consulted, and there have been no objections to the proposed street name. And did you have any questions?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any oral or written submissions from any members of the public regarding the naming of the street in Sunset Acres plan of condominium? Okay. And are there any oral or written submissions from any members of council regarding the naming? Councillor Trombetta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Which I find this is actually a nice name, and it doesn't meet the list. And I know in the past we've had to stick to this list. It's just sort of something that I don't mind thinking outside the box of this list, right? So, you know, I know I don't know how to put this, but I know in the past there's been issues with other street naming issues that have not been on the list, and I know it's done by the Heritage Committee that does it.
That's correct.
And, you know, I find the name's good. There's not a problem with it. But how do we encourage more residents to keep doing this? Like, I don't have a problem when it comes to a good name. Like, but other members, like not other members, but I know in the past last term of council there was issues on some street namings that didn't meet the list, right? So, you know, I hate being that person to say, you know, that's no good, this is good, no, that's no good, this is no good, right? But I really like this name, and I hope it sticks because it's a nice name. Like, I'm not opposed to it. So.
Okay. So only 50% of the names have to come from the list. So if this is outside, we're okay.
Okay. All right. There's some names on here that I think should be taken off.
You did not say that, Councillor Trombetta.
Anyways, but thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, you. Councillor Riley. It's okay. I called you first.
Thank you, Madam
I'll get
Chair.
over there.
So I have no objection to the name. I think it's a really nice name. I kind of wish there was more houses on the street to share that name, if anything. But my question through you, Madam Chair, to our Director of Planning is, so there's a commercial piece of this puzzle here, right? And looking at what we have here through the driveway, is that going to be part of the Sunset Acres or place that it's going to be, or like what's going to happen there?
Through you, Madam Chair, based on what you're looking at on the screen, the private road starts at Regional Road 12. So it is using the existing driveway for the first few hundred feet, and then veers to the northwest and then heads towards the cul-de-sac. All of that will be considered the plan of condo street,
So,
and
sorry,
the business will be off of that internal street.
So the business will be off Sunset?
Yes.
Okay, so then it's fair to assume that that should be one Sunset Place?
The naming is what council is or has the authority to approve. The numbering is what our fire chief does, and I know he's had discussions with Mr. Bosher about how to number the street. There's some discrepancy there that I don't know has necessarily been resolved. But yeah, as drawn, the fire chief is indicating numbering is off the internal street.
Okay, well, I just think as we're dealing with all the other stuff regarding to PERS, that remains consistent. I realize this today is about naming that. I was just more curious because it's the first time I've been able to see something where it clearly looks like it's part of that street and no longer part of Niagara Road 12. So anyways, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Cody.
Yeah, I just wanted to go on record sort of agreeing with Councillor Trombetta. I think that we have more to offer than just the past. And one thing we certainly have to offer in West Lincoln is beautiful rural sunsets across Farmers Field. So I think it's a very fitting name.
Okay, thank you. Anyone further? Okay, so please be advised that a technical report is being considered by the Planning Committee this evening, and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future Planning Committee and/or Council meeting. Everyone is invited to stay in attendance to hear the committee's comments and/or recommendation with respect to the naming of the street in Sunset Acres Plan of Condominium, which will take place shortly following the conclusion of this public meeting. Additionally, there's an attendance sign-in sheet, which is located on the table near the exit doors, which we would ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when signing the attendance sheet, that you place a check mark in the last column if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and/or decisions on this matter. This public meeting, with respect to the naming of the street in Sunset Acres Plan of Condominium, is concluded at the hour of 7:29. Thank you, Councillor. Okay. So we do have another public meeting this evening, and it's a site alteration permit. The purpose of this meeting is to give an opportunity for the public and members of council to provide comments and/or ask questions regarding the extension of permit number 002-2018 on lands owned by Mr. Velko Gavrik on lands municipally known as 8244 Silver Street, also known as Regional Road 65, Caister Centre. This is to advise that notice of this public meeting was circulated by individual notice to properties within 120 meters of the subject lands on October 21st, 2019. Will the Director of Planning and Building, Mr. Brian Treble, please explain the purpose and reason for this public meeting with respect to extension of a site alteration permit application for property known as 8244 Silver Street, also known as Regional Road 65, Caister Centre. Mr. Treble, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an application in accordance with the site alteration bylaw, and it is following up on a previous approval that was granted in 2018. So in August of 2018, council of that day held a public meeting to consider a request to bring in about 10,000 cubic meters, 1,000 loads of fill to elevate the level of the land, and the application was to improve the land for agricultural purposes. There was an engineering plan that was submitted at that time. It's part of the staff report here tonight again. The applicant is indicating that they need additional soil to complete the plan as drafted by the engineer, and hence the reason for this second application and second public meeting. Earlier this year, when the trucks were being hauled in, bylaw staff were receiving a number of complaints and had some very serious concerns with respect to the quality of the soil that was being hauled to the site. And as a result of some on-site inspections and evidence of shale, rock, and rubble, and questioning of the quality of the soil, the original permit from last year was in fact revoked. We revoked that permit in June of this year. Instructions were given to Mr. Gavrick that they needed to provide evidence that the work done to date could in fact be converted back to agricultural land if they had to import topsoil or whatever they had to do to make this actually valuable land for future agricultural purposes. Rather than doing that, their engineer is advising that they should bring in more of the subsoil now to elevate additional lands. Alexa, there's actually a drawing showing the A4 area. Thank you. So area A4 is along the eastern boundary of the property, and that is where the fill is proposed. They've been filling area A4. I don't know if everyone can see that. I guess in front of you, you can see it on your screen, but area A4 has been filled to a certain depth southerly, and the proposal is to fill in more of that. And the engineer is advising Mr. Gavrick that that additional subsoil should be brought in now, and after that work is done, then they'll import whatever topsoil is required in order to make this agricultural land. Contrary to the way staff had been advising them to do it, to convince us that the land is in fact going to work for agricultural purposes, and then we could maybe entertain more. So Mr. Gavrick certainly had the right to make the application. My advice was that they should be here tonight to explain themselves and try and convince council as to why their request is appropriate. Unfortunately, Mr. Gavrick, I believe, is stuck in Kingston, but there are two individuals in the audience who are here, I should say, to speak on his behalf, and perhaps I'll set the stage and leave it at that for now, and then we can have further discussion after we hear from the applicants, and I know there are some neighbors here as well.
Okay, thank you, Min. So Mr. Gavrick isn't here, so I think that is there an authorized agent for Mr. Gavrick that's here and is willing to speak? Would you come forward then, please, to the microphone? You'd have to come to the end, sir, please. That microphone is working. Thank you. And if you give your name and address to our clerk, please.
Yep. My name is Mario Cassio. I'm with the Brookfield Group on behalf of the homeowner. And the problem here is the back half of the property has not been completed. We were stopped before we could continue based on what Brian was talking about. And we need to proceed with the back half to elevate it to not be able to be, it's actually being flooded with groundwater all the time and not allowing proper drainage to take place. So that's the reason for the reapplication here to extend the permit.
Okay. I think we'll leave that for now then if you have nothing further to say. Did you also want to speak? Okay, so just hang tight. Yeah. If you can return to your chair if you like, and I'm going to ask for other members of the public to speak, sure, and members of committee, and then they may have some further questions for you. So okay, if you wouldn't mind, thanks, that would be great. Thank you. So I'm going to ask now if there are members of the public present who wish to ask questions or to provide comments with respect to the extension of permit for site alteration on lands owned by Mr. Velko Gavrick on lands municipally known as 8244 Silver Street, also known as Regional Road 65, Caser Center, and extension of an existing site alteration permit. So, okay. Mrs. McMahon, would you like to come forward, please?
Good evening, Madam Ganan. I'm here, my name is Michelle McMahon. I live at 8288 Silver Street, so I am on the west side of the property, on that side, and have been living there for approximately 23 years. I did speak at the last alteration permit, and it's still my perspective to be here tonight, not to personally be against Mr. Gavrick. I'm all for him wanting to you know, to create a wonderful farm property, to have an agricultural business. I'm not here to stop that in any way. I am here, though, as a property owner who is trying to protect her property, my husband's property, our family's property, and the wetlands that is on our property. It's about 18 acres of wetlands. Yes, it's wet. It's wet. And it's going to be wet because we are on a biosphere of wetlands. So I'm not sure how much more dirt is going to stop all of this problem, but that's just the way it is. Some of the other reasons that that I wanted to report on, I met with Brian on Friday, and I've read the October 4th site visit by the engineer, and a couple of comments about that I would like to have some assurance. I'm not sure who that's going to come from, whether it's from all of you or it's from the engineer or it's from Mr. Gavrick himself. They mentioned the ditch depth, and this was our concern the last time that we were here because, of course, we're concerned about the flooding that may occur. So when you read the engineer's report, he's got several recommendations about the ditch. The ditch does run between my property and Mr. Gavrick's property. There is a clear ditch that runs along our property line. I walked it again on Sunday. We have a ditch depth anywhere from 6 inches with a full puddle to 3 feet or 3 meters in height. So the engineer is recommending that it be cleaned of debris and everything else, and also that the depth could be more consistent along that whole line, especially if they're looking to go further back. Now, I didn't walk to the very end. I'm on 25 acres. I didn't walk to the very end, so I don't know what the whole ditch depth is. And I know there's problems out the front as well, too. But again, so I'd like to know how that's going to be happening, you know, who's going to be doing that. I do appreciate that Mr. Gavrick did employ this engineer. I'm great. That was our recommendation the last time I sat here, is that I wanted an engineer's report. I'd like to see another one in a year's time from now, depending on what decision is made here tonight. There's also, the engineer also reported some low areas in Area 8, A8, which again is on the west side of his property that is adjacent to mine. So again, low areas are going to tell you that that's filled with water. So the engineer again is recommending that those areas be filled in. So they're talking about putting all this dirt in A4. What about A8? The silt fence that was supposed to go up. I can't see a lot of it. I can see a little bit of it. I can't see a lot of it. So it's not, again, is it a silt fence that's supposed to be running from one end of the property to the other end? I don't know. I see very, very little of it. My other concern, and this goes back to my first time I was here, is the testing of the soil. If you read the initial report, the testing of the soil actually happened from where the dirt was taken from on Rymel Road. We've had no subsequent soil testing of the dirt that's landed in 8244. So when's that going to get done? I have a pond that's adjacent to their property. I have a well on my property. That's my main drinking source. When's that going to happen? I'd like to see some testing of the current dirt that's there, not the stuff that came from Rymel Road, because that's where the test pits were done. I think, okay, so that's personally where I'm at about all of this. My second point is that I am living in a community that I do know my neighbors, and I have heard their complaints all summer. I'm directly involved in my community because I work in the local school, so I hear from my neighbors. I know what's going on. I've heard about the destruction of the road, from the dirt to the cars bumping over it. I've been bumping over it. The near accident that happened with somebody in the ditch. We have children on our street with across the road, 2 houses up. There's lots of children. We've had very inconsiderate dump truck drivers They've been inconsiderate in terms of truck traffic, pushing their way to get onto the road first. And I have to tell you, my biggest complaint right now is that they are speeding through a school zone. And I'm watching them. And that disturbs me. I had my principal, I'm hoping he did it and followed up for me and made a phone call to the appropriate people. But I want some assurances from somebody. I'm not sure again who it's going to be, you guys, or it's going to be Mr. Gavrick, or it's going to be the dump truck drivers or that company. But we need to, I would really love to see the route changed, because we cannot have these dump trucks whizzing by our school zone. That's at a 60. So that's it. Again, I'm here from an environmental perspective. I want my property taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. McMahon. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to speak? Ma'am, would you come forward, please? Welcome.
Hi, my name is Judy Fuhrer. I live across the road from Valco's place, and they have been filling the property in a lot. I have 26 acres right across the road, and I've asked the township to come and dig out the ditches. They came out and they said they cleared the one that goes underneath Regional Road 65 from my property over to his property. And I've been there 27 years. And I've never had any flooding on my property until they started dumping across the road. Now the ditches, my ditches fill up, flood my front yard, so it looks like a lake. I have very, very old oak trees on the property. I do not want to lose them. And then across from my driveway, I have pasture with a pond. Last year, it was a lake. Not just a little pond, but a big lake. And that stopped the water that was coming from the north down to the back of my property and going into the front property from going away. And I was out there one stormy night with a tractor and a neighbor trying to clear the slush away so the water will drain, and it just backs up closer and closer to my house because they do not have the proper drainage that they used to have before. It's all filled in. And there is a map showing how, as that you can see, my side of the property, you can see where it comes down and down to the ditch. And that's supposed to go along the ditch and underneath the road and through where they're going to fill in now, because they've already started, right by the house, right here. Right by the house, there's a big ponding right there because water's not going anywhere. And I want to know how they're going to fix that so I don't have to worry about my home being destroyed because of them blocking off the right-of-way of drainage.
Okay. Thank you.
That's it? Okay.
We will go on to hear from our other member of the public, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the neighbor on the east side. I own the farm on the east side of this property. My chief concerns are, well, first of all...
Excuse me, just one sec. Your name, please?
Oh, Don DeWitt.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. First of all, when they started, there was a drainage ditch between our properties, and they filled that in already. And they've already raised it a lot with the fill they put in there already. It is not good fill. It's, like you said, you can see it. It's a lot of rock and whatever have you that comes in there. And now, after this, they want to double it again to put that much more fill in there and then raise it again with topsoil on top of that. My biggest concern is, am I going to wind up with a swamp on my property after all this is said and done? It's already wet enough in Casey Center. You know, in a wet spring, we're lucky we can get the tractors on the property. If they're this much higher than us, I'll never be able to use my farm anymore. It's a real concern for my property because he's right beside me. And like I said, the one ditch we did have between us, they've already filled it in. So where is all this water going to go to? It's going to go downhill. It's going to wind up all on my property. And the other concern that some of the other people have already commented on already is the trucks that do come in there. They're noisy, and they're dangerous, and we all have children. that we are concerned about. And I don't know. I would like to see some kind of better control over these trucks barreling down the highway the way they do and backing in and out, in and out, in and out. Last summer, I seen there'd be 8, 10 trucks back in there dumping all the time, just steady, all day long, all day long, all day long. It's just a massive amount of dirt. And like my big concern is I don't want my property to turn into a swamp at the end of this. But it's already up high. They took out the only drainage ditch that there was in between our properties, and now they want to put on, what, a foot of topsoil on top of this? Because for what they're covering up, they're going to have a foot to cover this up and make it growable again. Because there's rocks in there, there's all kinds of stuff I seen dump in there that is not going to cover anything, not even the case to clay. So that's my only concern. I'm concerned about my own property. If it gets that much higher, I know where water's going to go, and my farmer won't even be able to get on the property because, like I said, on a wet spring, he's lucky he can get on anyway, like now, in a wet spring. So if this goes up that much higher, then if it's wet at all, my farm would be useless.
Okay, thank you very much for coming in and expressing your concerns. We're really pleased that you did. Is there anyone further who has something they'd like to say concerning this issue? Mr. Tribble, did you have something you wanted to say?
The public is finished, Madam Chair. I can add some information that I'm aware of that I'd share with the committee.
Okay.
I brought pictures of my property being flooded from the road of the ditch that goes underneath.
Would you come forward again, please? The reason that I'm asking you is if you speak from the back, it doesn't get picked up on the recording, and that's important that we know what it is you're saying. So thank you again.
Yes, my name's Judy Fuhrer, and I brought pictures in of my front of my property that's never been flooded. We used to be able to cut along the ditch to make our property look nice, and now there's water all year round in my front ditches, and it has nowhere to go. And when it rains, like the rain we had there last week, my whole front yard was flooded again. So I have brought pictures in to show what they have done to my property in all the years since I've been there.
Okay, so do you have copies of those photos with you?
No, I just have them on my phone. I can get copies and bring them in.
Okay, would that? Yeah.
Yes.
So can you email them to the township?
Yes.
Okay, if you do that, then that supports what you've had to say this evening.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Treble, you wanted to speak now? I think I've given... Mrs. McMahon, do you want it? Why not? Come back, please. We want people to have their say.
I appreciate that because I'm in the same position where I have inconsistencies in the ditch that runs adjacent to the property. I guess I want to stress what is sitting in our ditches from the dirt. Is it toxic? I don't know. And so far, we have no proof to tell us what that water is. And I appreciate that we need to have drainage for working our farms. We don't work a farm, but we have a lot of trees. But again, my concern is the wetlands. The wetlands don't want to be flooded. They don't want to have toxins come into it. So how are we going to get to the point of lots of water sitting in our ditches, but what is that water that's sitting in our ditches?
Thank you. Okay.
If
fair play. They came back, you may come back.
So I understand there's a lot of concerned neighbors, but we have not altered any water drainage courses whatsoever. Like when we looked on the conservation wetlands drawing, whatever drainage areas there are, we plan to maintain that. So even though if you raise your land, like for example the land we're working on, we raise the land so high, we maintain the actual natural ditches that are there, it will not affect the neighbors whatsoever as long as you maintain the ditches. And from what I understand is it's each homeowner that's responsible for the cleaning of their own ditches, not the township, from what I understand.
Well, There are ditches and there are ditches, right? So the ditches between properties you're responsible for. The township does some ditching on some of the roads, but that's not quite the same thing. So let's get back to Mr. Treble, who had something further he wanted to say.
I could put the picture back up. So the picture that's on the screen is a picture that was provided to Ms. Fewer from the region. Given that this is a regional road, in the spring when Ms. Fewer was complaining about water ponding issues and the water not getting away and there being more water than ever before, we filed a complaint in our system and forwarded it to the region. I understand that Ms. Fewer actually had a meeting with a regional staff person on site, and it's the regional staff people that provided the drawing. At the same time as Ms. Fewer was complaining, Judy was complaining, Mr. Gavrick was also complaining that the water was ponding. He had more water than ever before, and the region needed to clean out their ditches. It was the region's fault the ditches weren't properly cleaned and the ditches weren't draining. However, in looking at the map that has been provided to Ms. Fewer from the region, it shows that Ms. Fewer's water is running to the regional ditch on the north side, then crossing through a culvert under the road towards Mr. Gavrick's and not going east or west or whatever direction it is on Silver Street along the ditch there, but continuing south onto Mr. Gavrick's property in a ditch. And yet Mr. Gavrick says his water's going to the ditch, so his water's flowing backwards to what he thinks, I think. And the water is actually supposed to be going through Mr. Gavrick's property and getting away to the south, as I read the drawing that's been provided by the region. So in the conditions of last year's approval that committee granted, we added two conditions. One was that they must implement the engineer's report, specifically with respect to the drainage plan that was identified in that engineer's report and Mrs. McMahon has referred to here tonight. And then the second piece of it was that when they're finished the work, the engineer has to confirm that they actually did what they said they were supposed to do and kept the ditches working properly. So that piece hasn't been achieved yet because they say they're not finished. There seems to be water issues. Whether it's been caused by the fill or not, I don't know, but that's about the only thing that's changed in my understanding of the area. So I share that with you, that the region's been actively involved and the region's of the opinion that the issue is the water is not getting away to the south.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Treble, for that. So any other members of the public that wishes to speak to this?
Yeah, just one more.
Then you need to come forward to the microphone, please. And then we'll move on. But everybody else has had a second turn, so you may also have a second turn, sir.
I just wanted to re-emphasize, there was a drainage ditch between our properties and they filled it in. It's not there anymore.
Okay, thank you.
So that water's not going, there's no ditch there for it to run in anymore. It was there for it to run from the property, and it's on his side of the fence, which I assume is the property line. It's on his side of the fence, but they filled it in. It's not there anymore.
Okay, so
So this water's going to go somewhere.
There's
no drainage ditch there anymore. They filled it in.
Okay, that's a piece. Good. Okay, so we are going to move to see if there are any members of committee who have. I see your hands. I see your hands, but you had a chance to speak, and we could debate this issue of water. And obviously, water is a keen issue, but there are some other things in terms of questions that perhaps members of the committee may have. So I'm going to halt with the public for a minute. I'll come back if need be, and it may be, in fact, that a question that somebody on the committee has may be directed to one of you. So, Mayor Bylsma.
So I realize that this is the public portion, so I have no, I'm going to reserve some of my concerns and questions and comments to later on when we deal with this. But at this point, this is a fact finding. My question is, in my understanding, is it not true that the soils that were placed on this property were just placed on the existing landscape as it was? Was there any cut or scraping or removal of the existing topsoils before the additional soils were added? Do we have a...
Okay, so Mr. Treble, do we know anything about that?
I am of the opinion they were not scraped. The topsoil is underneath this soil, but we should perhaps hear from the ones that brought it in.
Okay, so now you may come forward because perhaps you have an answer to that question. So thank you.
I know.
Okay.
Okay, so just to clarify, like the proper protocol for this kind of work is strip the existing topsoil, stockpile it to one side, place the fill, and then at the end, place the topsoil back on top. But to answer some of the questions that everybody has, we weren't able to finish our work because we were stopped by the township with their concerns of material coming in, that we provided soil reports to the township. So, like, I understand there's concerns with drainage, but we haven't finished our work. So there may be some ditches that need to be reopened, I agree. But
Okay, so I'm going to interject a minute because you said you provided soil reports, and I read the entire report, and the soil reports are very old. So are there new, updated soil reports that have not been given to us? Because they were not part of our agenda package, if there were. Mr. Trevor.
In addition, Madam Chair, the soil report that we got a year ago was not even the soil that was brought to the site.
Exactly. So the soil reports that we have that are part of this agenda package are from
a different site.
A different site, and it's not the site, and it was claimed at the time that it was no longer the site that the soil was coming from.
Correct.
So we have a very good, solid question about this soil content, and that was why you were stopped.
Okay, well,
It had nothing to do with the fact that the town did not want this work done, or was disallowing work that we had promised could be done. It was because of the quality of the soil was being challenged. So, so we'll just hold it at that, but thank you.
I still have my question out there, and the question is this: if what you described to me means that somewhere on that site there should be a mound of the former topsoil. There should be a mound there. Now, when I drive past the site, I don't see a mound. Like typically, when I see a development go up, you know, I know those mounds. They usually sit in the very front corner, actually quite close to the road. They're surrounded by a filter fence, and they're reserved. And then when the development goes up, you see them slowly eat away at that, and it gets distributed back around. I don't see that mound of the former topsoil. So where is that former topsoil?
It's towards the back of the property, but the property drops off so much that unless you walk back there, it's not noticeable from the road. You'd actually have to walk back there to see it.
So then let me ask this follow-up question. Once, and this is by no means in any form of approval, but once the work on that site is done, that former topsoil will be sufficient to cover the current soil with a sufficient cover that would be able to be farmed again?
We use the existing topsoil that's there, and if we have to import any more, we will import the rest that's required to finish.
Another question, and I don't know who exactly can answer this. Is Mr. Gavrick a farmer? I don't know the man. So is he like a cash cropper? Is he?
I can answer that. No, because I live right across the road. He lives in Hamilton.
Okay.
And his mom owns the property.
Was the okay? So let me ask a follow-up question.
Hold on. So you've asked a question, and we haven't recorded the answer because it came from the back of the room.
Yeah.
So would you mind, please, just coming forward and answering that question so that it's.
But as far as we're concerned, this is a neighbor.
Okay,
It's valid.
so you have asked the question.
I live right across the road. I see what goes
Okay,
on.
just a second. Just get.
I am.
Okay, yeah, I just want you to sit down so the microphone picks it up. So the mayor has asked the question about the viability of actually farming and whether Mr. Gavrick is a farmer. And now you can answer, please.
Judith here. He is not a farmer. He lives in Hamilton.
Okay.
Okay. And my son-in-law and his father used to rent that land across the road and farm it.
Till how recently?
Till about maybe 9 years ago.
Okay.
Then they hired another man to come in to farm it for them. And that land hasn't been farmed for, I'd say, maybe about 3 to 5 years.
Okay, thank you. That answers
thank
that
you.
question.
Thank you. Okay, do you have another?
Well, and then finally, the site plan that we approved last year, did it include like a drainage component? So it all included that. So
It did.
none of that should have been mucked with.
No.
Okay. And are we sure that even the current work that's been done, is it compliant? I understand what a gentleman had mentioned, that they were stopped and maybe there's some incompleteness, but did we see that there was a sensitivity to the site alteration permit that was permitted?
Mr. Treble.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's hard to answer that last question. Part of the area that they were filling is over towards where that drainage area appears to come south from Regional Road 20. Whether there's actually a channel in there or not anymore, I don't know. I suspect that that's part of the problem, that they've mucked it up and they haven't fixed it up. But at the end, it's supposed to be fully compliant. So we're kind of stuck in the middle, I suppose, in some respects. Just getting back to the farmer piece, I was told by Mr. Gavrick that the land is rented to a Mr. Felker, and that Mr. Felker will be the farmer and has historically been the farmer, and I know who Mr. Felker is, and I've told him that I want a letter from him at the end of this process that says, I will put my equipment in this ground.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I just one final question, a little bit more of a hypothetical nature, but is it possible to allow the current situation with the soils that are present there to be remediated in such a way that we can have a proof before we continue down this road, that the area that has been affected, because we understand that there's a lot of soil that has been imported, that said ditches are cleaned out, drainage meet the specs of the area that has been covered, and the area that has been covered does have the topsoil put back onto it. So we have some assurances that have before any more soils come in. Is there a way that we could allow for that measure of goodwill? Because I'd hate to. I'll leave it at that. I'll leave my question at that. Is that a possibility?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's pretty much exactly the message that staff gave to Mr. Velko in June when we revoked his permit. The message was basically, you've got enough done, convince us that this in fact is farmable and you can actually put it to a state where it's usable again, and then we can talk. But the approach that Mr. Velko has taken is to ignore...
Velko or Gavrick?
Gavrick, sorry.
Yeah.
No problem.
The approach that Mr. Gavrick has taken, Velko's his first name, I guess, is contrary to that. He's chosen to ignore the direction of staff and gone to his engineer, who says, no, you got to bring in more soil first and then do it that way. So I think council has the final say, and if you refuse to grant more until you're convinced that this is farmable, you got the power to do that. The other thing I'd like to put on the record, Madam Chair, is I just can't wait for these folks to take me to show me the pile of topsoil that I don't believe exists.
And so I think I've got my answers for the public portion of this. I will have more comments to make later on. Thank you.
So are there any other members of committee who have questions? Councilor Rayner.
Yes, through you to Mr. Treble, how many acres has been covered?
Do you remember the size of A4?
I don't remember now.
It's in the report.
Yeah. No, I didn't write the report.
So A4 is 9 acres according to the report.
There is more.
So there's at least 9 acres?
I would wonder if 9 acres is, do you recall the calculation? I'm wondering if that's actually what's available to be filled yet, but we'll have to do some measuring to confirm that.
Yeah.
All right, so even taking 9 acres and scraping the topsoil would make a substantial pile that should be visible from any distance on Regional 65, I would think. I find it difficult that it's way at the back to the point where you can't see it. I'm like Mr. Treble, I'm a little bit skeptical of that because that's a considerable volume of dirt that has to be moved. And normally they don't spread it out on a longitudinal basis. They usually make a big pile. So the big pile would be visible from anywhere, I would think. The other thing through you to Mr. Treble, is there anything the township can do at this point with regards? We've got a gentleman who lives next door to the east that says a ditch was filled in. We got the people who are bringing the dirt in that said they didn't fill any ditches. So that's one is black and one is white. There's no gray here. Either the ditch is filled or it's not filled. Is there any obligation on the township's behalf that they can check it, or is there anything through the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority or whatever is necessary to go out there? Because I believe there is regulations about plugging natural water courses. Is there not, Mr. Treble?
Through you, Madam Chair, the way this permit has been approved, the Conservation Authority has an interest in the lands towards the rear that are the provincially significant wetlands.
I lost it.
Something happened. The drainage ditch that Mr. DeWitt is identifying, I believe, would be along the east side of Velco Gavrick's property. That, I think, we would have to ask the engineer to give us confirmation that the ditch and swale is still in existence in accordance with the requirements. If not, we are holding a security. In theory, the township could go in and do the work ourselves. I don't know that that's ideal. I think we'd probably be heading to court to have the courts order them to complete the works according to the plans. So there are avenues available, but the preferred one would be to have the engineer confirm it for us, I think.
Okay, the next question I have is the neighbor across the road, Judy, who's having flooding beyond anything that she's experienced in the years that she's lived there. Obviously, is a reflection that something on the other side of the road, since that's the only thing that's changed, must be the factor responsible. Is there any further investigations that can be done through the township or through the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority in order to find out exactly what the cause of this so that this thing can be resolved? Because it is certainly not something she is used to, so something must have caused this.
Madam Chair, my thought would be, I guess, if it's general consensus of the committee that these issues need to be clarified before the committee is prepared to entertain a recommendation report, that we give that kind of direction here tonight, and that we get confirmation from the engineers that the ditches exist or the ditches are reestablished as required before we move forward.
Thank you. Madam Chair, having farms out there, big ones, drainage is everything to agricultural land. Without proper drainage, you do not have viable agricultural land. And anything that happens with regards to changing the profile of the soil in height or whatever the case may be when they haul stuff in is crucial in order to ensure that the neighbors have proper flow so that their agricultural interests are not affected by this. This particular situation to me has been a problem from day one. The phenomenal amount of trucks that have been coming up Caister Center Road, the potential for accidents along Regional 65, the speed that the trucks are going past Caister Central School. It's a trucking issue. It's the quality of the dirt issue. It's a drainage issue. There's neighbors that have got proof that something is wrong. I believe that the township, my opinion is that we need to further investigate this and get these situations resolved before we entertain this discussion any further.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any further comments, questions? I'm actually very sorry that Mr. Gavrick isn't here because I had some particular questions to ask him. The engineering report was a year old. It was based on the permit that he had in the past. And so to me, there was no indication when the email came on the supposed second report whether anything had ever been done from the first, so that all of those recommendations to me look very much like exactly the ones that were in the recommendation report that the supposed engineers gave the first time. So I had some specific questions that I wanted to ask about that. So I would tend to agree. I think we need perhaps some more information and certainly some investigation of the drainage. We are well aware of the problem with trucking. We've been dealing with that before. We had the site alteration open house. I'd like to know whether Mr. Gavrick took part in that and whether he had was aware of the kinds of concerns that people have about what's going on. So at this point in time, anyway, I think we have just about as many questions as we started with. So if there's nothing further from members of committee, then I'm going to move on. So please be advised that a technical report is being considered by council this evening and that a recommendation report will be forthcoming to a future planning committee and or council meeting. There's an attendance sign-in sheet which is located on the table near the exit doors, which we would ask all present to sign. Please ensure that when signing the attendance sheet for this evening's council meeting that you place a check mark in the column marked Gavrick if you wish to be advised of any subsequent meetings and or decisions on this matter. It is suggested that you include your email address with your mailing address and your phone number on the attendance sign-up sheet. If there's someone that is interested in observing council and or committee discussions about a particular issue, it is suggested that you watch the township's website for posting of agendas to review items that will be discussed at a council and or committee meeting. The agendas for meetings are posted on the township website at 4 p.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Additionally, meeting schedules are also noted on the website for the public to view. So this public meeting with respect to extension of a site alteration permit for Mr. Velko Gavrick on lands municipally known as 8244 Silver Street, also known as Regional Road 65, Caister Centre, is concluded at the hour of 8:13. Thank you. Okay, so members of committee, we have a member requesting a break, so let's say that we will resume in 5 minutes with the rest of our meeting. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your input tonight.
Too late now. It all went well anyways.
why I have pictures. I got pictures of them showing my who am I going to sue? My husband.
I don't. I'm very glad to see you guys here today. Being a fellow Easter egg, come on. Is there a meeting, like, what's the meeting that's after this? Or the rest of the plan? Right, your plan. Yeah, well, that's what I want to know. Are you addressing this issue again? So basically, that's what the bottom line is going to be. You're going to send it back to staff. Okay. Okay. So you said I wanted all of this done after the first permit was guaranteed, was given. And now they want to, so you guys gave them approval for 1,000 plus loads. We know they've gone over. So all the recommendations should have been done, because I just basically repeated myself tonight. And now another 1,000 loads. So we have to fix what we've got and then let them apply again. But thank you. I know, well, that was my son and my husband that came over and got 2 truckloads.
All right, so continuing on with our meeting this evening.
Okay, I'll call you when it's over.
Okay. Okay, item number 5 is appointments, and there are no appointments this evening. Number 6 is a request to address items on the agenda. Note section 10.14, subsections 5 and 6, that 1 hour in total is allocated in this section of the agenda, and each individual person should be provided with 5 minutes to address items on the agenda. So are there any members of the public wishing to further address items on this agenda this evening? Okay, seeing none. Consent agenda items. All items listed below are considered to be routine and non-controversial and can be approved by one resolution. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests it, in which case the item will be removed from the consent resolution and considered immediately following adoption of the remaining consent agenda items. So item P118-19 is a consent agenda. The recommendations are that the Planning, Building, Environmental Committee hereby approves the following consent agenda items. 1, items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5B and are hereby received for information. And 2, that item 6B and is hereby received and the recommendations contained therein be adopted with the exception of items. And are there any exceptions this evening? Okay, so I'm going to read them then. 1, a technical report, number PD-175-19, Adele Acres Limited, Ron Vermeer agent, zoning bylaw amendment, file number 1601-017-19. 2 is a technical report, number PD-176-19, zoning bylaw amendment, temporary use bylaw, Thomason Garden Suite application. 3, the technical report, PD-183-19, the official plan amendment and rezoning public meeting to consider winery, brewery, and special occasion policies and regulations for inclusion in the Township of West Lincoln official plan and zoning bylaw. 4, technical report PD-173-19, proposed street name for Sunset Acres, Sunset Place, Fred and Joyce Bosher, 2942 and 2946 Regional Road 12, Grimsby Road, file number 2100-015-19. 5, technical report number PD-181-19, the new site alteration permit, extension of permit number 002-2018, 8244 Silver Street, Velco Gavrik, file number 3000-008-19, and recommendation report number PD-174-19, authority to sign permission to enter forms for urban boundary expansion project for on-site work. So I need a mover, please. Mayor Bylsma, and a seconder. Councillor Jonker. Okay, so you've heard all of those items. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, and that motion carries. And there are no communications, so we'll move on to staff reports. Item P119-19 is Kelly Martell, Associate, MHBC Planning. Read the recommendation report number PD-178-19, Garrett Borma and Nicole Ravensbergen, Jeremy Denbeston, Agent. Zoning Bylaw Amendment, file number 1601-014-19. The recommendation is 1, that report PD-178-19 regarding Garrett Borma and Nicole Ravensbergen, Jeremy Denbeston, Agent, Zoning Bylaw Amendment, file number 1601-014-19, dated November 11th, 2019, be received. And 2, that Section 34, subsection 17 of the Planning Act apply, and that no further public meeting is required. And 3, that application for Zoning Bylaw Amendment 1601-014-19, submitted by Garrett Borma and Nicole Ravensbergen, Jeremy Denbeston, Agent, and corresponding bylaw be approved and passed. And that 4, that staff be authorized to circulate the notice of decision for a zoning bylaw amendment with the corresponding 20-day appeal period. So I need a mover for that, please. Councillor Riley, and a seconder. Councillor Cody. Okay. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that motion also carries. Okay, so item P120-19 has been pulled, I believe.
Madam Chair, Mr. Arians was intending to attend tonight to speak, but then has withdrawn his request. My advice to Mr. Arians was that the technical report can proceed tonight because it's just a tech, and that he is now going to give us revised plans. And do you want me just to explain it a little bit so that you're aware?
If you would, because I'm sure that not everybody is aware, and and then the rest of this will stand.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So, I think it was July, we held a public meeting for one of the properties in the Northwest Quadrant, the lands north of the railway tracks on the west side of South Grimsby 5. And at that meeting, there were a couple of concerns expressed by the public, but they weren't anything more than really noise-related concerns. I shouldn't belittle them for the people complaining. They're big concerns. But for staff, our concerns were more around the appropriateness of the type of development for the area and whether or not the development as proposed was in fact appropriate development for Smithville. And Alexa, can you put up the drawing that shows the two different pieces of this puzzle? The way the developer has proposed the development here, the application that's before us is for a plan of subdivision. And the plan of subdivision, as Alexa is showing on the screen, just the first one you had up, just use that. Okay. So the plan of subdivision creates a series of single-family lots and semi-town related development along what they're calling Street A. Street A is a public street. That's it for public road development in this proposal as it's currently situated. And the concern I had was the block to the top, I think, is block 23, right? The concern I had was block 23, as outlined in red, is an extremely odd-shaped piece of land. What can happen in that piece of land? We're creating it now as a remnant piece if we approve this plan of subdivision, and I want to see what the final product could look like. And the final product they gave us was a whole lot of two-story townhouse development on a private street. And in fact, it was even more complicated because it was a private street with the condos fronting on the public street being Spring Creek and then South Grimsby 5. So it was going to be the same type of lots that Rick Van Leeuwen was concerned about, but we were able to settle with Rick on 2 lots that were rear-fronted, as they called it. So they were going to have a front yard facing Spring Creek and a front yard with a garage facing onto the internal street, and no amenity space, no place for kids or families in sort of private backyards. So I expressed to John that I didn't know that that was necessarily the type of development that was appropriate for Smithville. And in fact, taking it a step further, we have a couple of developments like that now proposed. Rosehaven is a lot of that same style of development at the back of the Mars development. And Stepping Stones is that kind of development. And the message I've been hearing is that they're selling maybe a unit a month, which is a bit of a slow absorption rate, and yet we are supposed to be growing the amount of units that we're putting on the market. And so we're creating, in my estimation, about a 10-year supply of condo towns through this process. If you, Alexa, add on now the layer of what they showed the condos to be, it's a very heavy concentration of condo towns around this public piece that goes through the middle. So we attempted to express concerns to Mr. Arians that we didn't know that this necessarily captured the market. That was a lot of townhouse development, not a lot of singles, not a lot of semis. And we got a couple of consolations from Mr. Arians, if I can. There's no parkette identified here, but yet they want us to assume a storm pond that's not part of the original plan either. So we were able to convince Mr. Arians to include a parkette in the plan. And then there was a couple of lots that were aligned kind of funny, so he agreed to that realignment. But I went back to Mr. Arians again and said, I'm not convinced this is Smithville. I really want you to reevaluate this thing. It's not necessarily what we're approving now, but it's the long-term vision of what this should look like. And the message on Friday basically was, take it or leave it. It's all or nothing. By Monday, the message was, I can come up with an alternate plan. So as it sits right now, I haven't seen what the alternate plan looks like, but based on his description to me, I think it's a step forward, a step towards something that staff can maybe accept. So right now, I think, Madam Chair, the message can be basically accept this report and the recommendations of the report, and that we'll be back with a recommendation report once we see and are okay with the plans proposed by Mr. Arians for this particular parcel of land.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Tribble, for that explanation. I think that that's necessary. Mayor Billsma, question?
So the piece that's proposed, I suppose I don't have necessarily an issue with it. And I don't know that by so if I approve it, I don't think I've done anything wrong. But my question has to do with these two-story condo type units. Is that, by any definition, is that considered affordable housing? Like and I use that term with my nose plugged because to me that term is a political term, and it's very undefined, largely undefined. At some level, a mansion is affordable because somebody's living in it and they own it, so it was affordable to a very wealthy person. So it's a subjective term, but if there is some kind of definition of affordable housing, do condos come into that, or do they, because the ongoing fees that are incurred? So,
Madam Chair, I think the mayor's pretty much on the mark. There's no definition. What works for Smithville won't work for the next town in terms of affordability either. In Smithville, it seems that the people buying into units, when they buy into the unit and put down a mortgage, or get a mortgage and put down payment down, they're paying a pretty hefty monthly payment to down pay the mortgage. Add on to it a condo fee, and it seems to be enough to break the bank in some cases. So I know that Stepping Stones, it's a very nice product, but when you add the condo fee in it, it takes it out of the market for some of the people that are looking for entry-style housing. This, in theory, should be entry-style housing, but that condo piece kind of breaks it. Mars, I think, might be a little bit further ahead in that regard because they don't have the condo fee. It's a public road with condo towns facing it. But even there, Mars is having some struggles. They are asking for some bungalow developments as part of it, and that they see is a bit of a market that they didn't have an opportunity for. The other piece that's interesting is in Stepping Stones, the units, I believe, are selling for somewhere in the 400s right now, but I'm told that there was a resale just happened in there and it was $550. So even those are not affordable to a lot of the people that need to come to this town to be able to work in the businesses that have shingles hanging out looking for people to work there. So I don't think we've got the answer just yet. Certainly I know the argument is that you need to make more units on a smaller frontage, so narrower units, and that's how you get towards affordability. These condo towns were 6-meter wide units that were proposed, but we might have to be starting to look at, I don't know what exactly is the answer yet for affordability. In talking to a couple of people, they need to reduce the value of the prime land to start with. So they're paying $500,000 an acre or more right now for the land, and hence that alone is elevating the cost of development and sales. So we just have to keep exploring it. I don't have a good answer. I really don't.
But when you're an excellent question and an excellent answer, but when they're looking at it, when you read the justification report, you know, you can see that what they're trying to do for their clients, IBI Group, what they're trying to do is justify why they can have that density. So they are looking at meeting the density targets as set out in the provincial policy statement and trying to do that. And so I really appreciate that our staff's giving a little pushback and saying that may work somewhere, but that's not really working in Smithville. It's not working in West Lincoln. So
I just have two follow-up comment and then a question, and the comment is this: if we're truly as a council interested in providing affordable homes, I think that we need to give up, or we need to kind of put a line in the sand on in my opinion, two areas, and maybe others have other areas. One of them is I don't know that this movement in our municipality towards condominiums is the way that we want to go, but rather some freehold. And I understand that there's a certain messiness to that, and I did have a discussion with Mr. Treble about the idea that, you know, in downtown Toronto, for example, you can buy a fourplex and you can have red shingles on the first unit, brown shingles on the next one, silver on the third one, right over the porch, and one person can paint all their bricks orange and the next person paint all their bricks white. There's a certain charm to that. Other people might call it messy, you know, crazy. But I will say this, in the Toronto market, they're affordable. They're the most affordable. Well, they're not cheap. I'm just saying that they are the most affordable places in Toronto. So I want to say that these are not dictated by condominium type rules and legislations about exteriors and when the roof gets done, and it has to be done all at once and the whole neighborhood gets done and those kind of things.
Yeah, but the regentrification of neighborhoods is changing a lot of that.
Okay,
I will just say firsthand, they sit well close to $1 million, and my granddaughter says she lives in the pretty blue house, but it's 100-year-old row housing.
I understand that,
and that's certainly not the way we want to go either.
What I'm trying to put forward to the council as a whole is the movement to a lot of condominiums inside the town urban boundary of Smithville, I don't think is going to achieve our target of affordability. But there are consequences for that. And the second thing that I wanted to put forward is we put forward a design manual in the previous term that allowed for certain conditions to be met on some of our more public roads. Mm-hmm. And Again, I think I'm not calling it a mistake. I'm saying that it's presenting a challenge to our other constraint, which is affordability. So case in point, the RVL development that we put forward on Station and Spring Creek Road required Mr. Van Leeuwen to frontscape. And what I mean by that is on the front of the house, there's the appropriate gabling and dressed up appearances, cottage returns and porticos and pillaring and landscaping. And then because it was on our streetscape, he was required to do some of the similar things onto the backside. And we required this of the RVL on the corner of Hornack. I think it's Hornack and Station, some of those houses, because they were seen on two sides, there was extra. My point is, none of that makes these houses very affordable, because all of that dressed up exterior implications are expensive. They're details that aren't necessarily, and so we may have, as a council, to wrestle with the fact that we have this design thing, and we like a pretty town, but we have to hold that up and against an affordable town. And so I like to have us come to terms with the fact that in, for example, St. Catharines, where we have, we call them the wartime houses, and they were considered temporary dwellings, and they were as plain as can be. 85 years later, they're still in existence. They're still standing. Some of them are quite cute. Some of them not so cute. But after 85 years, you know, some of them have been replaced. But the reality is we may have to settle for a plainer fabric in order to meet affordability. So are we going to be an affordable town or a pretty town? And I don't think we can have it necessarily both ways to the extremes. So we have to find that compromise in the middle. Those are my comments and my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Riley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess first and foremost, through you to Director of Planning, thank you for standing up for this, because I think it's important that, you know, majority of us, when we ran on smart growth. And I don't think, when I first saw this plan, and I think it was August 12th, because actually the meeting I was away, and I had to go back and watch the video when I was getting caught up at the time, and I rewatched it over the weekend when this plan first came forward and the residents spoke against some of their concerns, spoke up for their concerns. But that being said, I remember when I first saw this, I was concerned by the number of units going in that area, and I know even driving by that area, and they have like the big nice sign up, and they kind of have, you know, what it's going to go there. I've had constituents reach out to me and mention their concern to the idea of, you know, what impact that's going to have to that part of our town. You know, you got approximately 132 to 136 units going in that area, even the store ponds to the left, and then I'm guessing the parquet somewhere in the middle. Those aren't like, at least not the neighborhoods I grew up in, and they feel a little bit more industrialized than they do friendly and welcoming. So even as the mayor says, it might be a little bit more on the plain side, and what are we giving? I think at the same time, looking at the geography or the landscaping of our community, it's not like we don't have anywhere else to build, and I don't think we're in the same situation that, say, Grimsby may be in, where, you know, land is hard to come by. I think, you know, we can, you know, accommodate different needs, and I think the market dictates what people are going to pay. You know what I mean? If we have these types of condos already struggling to go at, you know, 1 unit a month, like that's clearly indicating that no one wants to, you know, dying to move in here for that particular thing. But I can say to people who I have you know, chatted with just in passing that have recently moved to our area, as their biggest thing is they were thrilled to get the house they got, because the exact same house that they got here, in most situations, not even a new build, but just a current build, was about $200,000 to $300,000 more elsewhere. So when we talk about affordability, it's not so much that we're not affordable, but if we're going to work on that, that needs to be a different idea of whether that's a complex that accommodates, you know, some kind of community retirement facility that's going to create that different aspect of condo, not condo townhouse, but maybe condo complex, and if that makes any sense at all. So again, I think I really appreciate you staying up to this, because this was a little bit concerning to me when I saw these many units going in this area, and I'd be interested to see what they come back at. I realize that, you know, the more units they get in, the more money they can get out of it. But to me, this doesn't. I don't see anything in town that reflects this. I also don't see how our town can support something like this in its current state. There was one other thing I wanted to mention that you guys had mentioned. I guess I'll just leave that there for now because it's escaped me. So.
Okay. Anybody else? Councillor Cody.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of with the mayor on this. I can't have our cake and eat it too. Like, everyone has sat here and talked about affordable housing, which we mean lower cost housing that people who work minimum wage jobs or slightly above can afford. And when that's the kind of housing you're talking about is this or apartments, like, what do we want? Affordable housing is not, 50-year-old homes on half-acre lots with 50-year-old trees. Like, it's not like this is quote unquote affordable housing or apartment buildings. I would much rather see this in our community than 3 or 4 story apartment buildings. I mean, if we either want affordable housing or we don't, and unfortunately, this is it. Like, we can't have it both ways.
Mr. Treble.
I don't want to belabor the discussion, but the one thing I guess just to add, as part of the whole urban boundary study that's been approved to proceed, part of that master planning is going to be looking at Smithville and what is Smithville. So as part of that whole discussion, I think it's an appropriate time to have discussion around what we think affordable means for Smithville and how we get there. So I think keep those thoughts and keep them, revolving around, and as we start to better understand what we think affordability means for Smithville, that will feed into the studies that are going to be going over the next a year and a half to 2 years.
Okay, thank you. Madam CAO, please weigh in.
Don't normally weigh in on these, but I was just thinking about the strategic planning exercise that's going on. Next week we're going to be finalizing the results from the public engagement. So I think you should have these sort of thoughts in your mind too, as we're trying to define some of the strategies and targets that you want to set for this term.
Well, that generated something from the other side too. Councillor Riley.
It just kind of dawned on me. I'll make this quick. I think going into that meeting, going into that meeting, it'd be wise to kind of consider what is affordable to us. And so when I think of affordable housing personally, I guess I'm reflecting on where I am in life and what I can afford. And so if we're looking at it for somebody else who's, I'm assuming, is either looking at the same or hoping for less, what is that dollar figure and how do we achieve that? So if we're talking about affordable housing to somebody else, that might be like $150,000 to $200,000, and how do we achieve that? If that's the demographic that we're going towards, or are we looking at trying to sustain things between $400,000 to $500,000? So again, that's a great comment by the CAO there, because even for myself, like I really don't know what the scope of what everyone else is around the horseshoe here, what their interpretation of affordable housing. To me, I don't want to pay $1 million for the house that I bought for $400,000. To me, that's affordable housing. Someone else.
And the larger the group, and the more you were around people, and
exactly.
So when you sit, for example, at an age-friendly advisory committee meeting, in the rest of the region, a lady said, I can't afford more than $500 a month. So you just tough, yeah. It's just really it's very, very, very general.
Yeah, and trying to figure out how that achieved.
Councillor Rayner.
Affordable housing to me is just definitions of what you can afford. I mean, I'm building a house right now. It's what I can afford. It's in the process of being built. So it depends on your budget, depends on what you want, depends on your income. There's a whole whack of factors, but I don't think we're in a position to be judging all that. But I would think it'd be the responsibility of developers to know what to build in order to be marketable. That's really beyond us to me. That's what they're doing this for, is to sell it. So they're not going to intentionally screw it all up so that they're building stuff that can't sell, because that doesn't make any sense. And if they did do that, they still wouldn't be in business. So I don't really think it's our play. It's theirs. And like I say, affordable housing it depends on the person.
Okay. Councillor Jonker, did you want to say something?
Yeah, at the end of the day, affordable housing depends on the market, right? And like you're saying, like he's selling how many, it's not moving. So then he's going to have to look back and say, you know what, I'm not doing this, I can't. So that's what I mean. Like the market dictates affordable housing. And if we're going to have minimum wage that can afford a house, like what are they gonna be able to afford? The market, you're gonna need to flood the market with houses like crazy. And we're gonna develop and grow, and that's what you have, that's something that you can't do either, right? It's something that's gotta be done carefully, so.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Treble, back to you.
Don't mean to belabor this. Yes, I do. Really?
Go for it.
Part of what Councillor Jonker just said, I think, is partly the strategy of this government in terms of trying to lessen some of the rules to get more housing on the market, hoping that by flooding the market, it keeps costs down. But the challenge is the planning approval process is so cumbersome and so complicated that you can somehow encourage more and get more land and stuff like that, but we've got to simplify the process, and that part hasn't happened yet. The other thing, just in response to Councillor Rayner, and because the applicant's not here, I want to be careful how much I say, but this particular applicant, I think, is focused more on what Councillor Riley said, and that was getting the most units out of the land base possible, because this guy is not going to build them. He's going to flip this development and sell it to somebody else, and he's going to sell it based on the number of units that are approved. So he's not going to build them, so he doesn't really pay attention to the market piece, and that was my argument back to John. I've dealt with this guy before. Old Town. Old Town's plan was approved in 2006, and we're just now getting something that's starting to look like a subdivision. They missed the market so many times, and that's my fear again. They're not paying attention to the market. They're going to flip it based on the number of units. And so that's partly why I went back and said, I don't want to go through that again. I want it done right the first time.
Thank you. And I think we'll end there. So I'm going to move then the recommendation. So again, it's been explained. The report number PD-180-119. Just 19, sorry. Technical report, Dunlow Developments, Inc., IBI Group Agent, application for draft plan of subdivision and application for zoning bylaw amendment, files number 1601-022-18, zoning bylaw amendment, and 2000-087-18, plan of subdivision. So the recommendation is that report PD-180-19 regarding Dunlow Developments, Inc., IBI Group Agent, application for draft plan of subdivision and application for zoning bylaw amendment, file number 1601-022-18, zoning bylaw amendment, file number 2000-087-18, plan of subdivision dated November 11th, 2019 be received. And 2, that staff prepare a recommendation report based on the current plan or a further revised plan for the next available Planning, Building, Environmental Committee meeting. Staff prefer a further revised plan subject to committee and council input. So I need a mover for that, please. Councillor Riley, and a seconder. Councillor Jonker. Okay. All those in favor? Well, we've discussed it to death. Do you want to do it again? Go ahead.
No, I just want to make sure that committee's aware through Mr. Treble, this is a technical report, and therefore you vote accordingly.
Okay, so this is just, and I think the important part of this, number 1, explained what it was. Number 2 says that staff prepare a recommendation report based on the current plan or a further revised plan. And I think Mr. Treble has already pointed out to us that the IBI group staff are looking at that revised plan already. So I think that's the key part to this. So thank you for the clarification. No, it's coming back. It's coming back. So by voting on this, all we're saying is go ahead, work with them, get the revised plan, and bring it back. Mr. Treble. Okay. Okay. Well, hopefully we all got that without that, but there was a whole lot of discussion on that. So, okay, so I have a mover, Councillor Riley, and a seconder, Councillor Jonker. So all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that motion carries. Okay, so item P121-19, Director of Planning and Building Brian Treble, re-report PD 179-19. a recommendation report, street naming of Thompson Road in the Industrial Park area of Smithville, 911 PERS. The recommendation is one, that report PD-179-19 regarding the recommendation report, street naming of Thompson Road in the Industrial Park area of Smithville, 911 PERS, dated November 11th, 2019, be received. And two, that a bylaw be passed to name the road identified in Schedule A, Thompson Road. And three, that staff be instructed to ensure all sign blades read Thompson Road, and that a sign blade be installed at the corner of Pearson Street and Thompson Road. And four, that staff notify all businesses and agencies affected by this bylaw. So I need a mover for that, please. Mayor Bilsma, and a seconder. Councillor Riley. Are there any questions or comments about that? Mayor Bilsma, I can't tell. Oh, thank you. I wasn't sure whether you were ready to vote or ready to ask a question. Okay, all those in favor? Good. And there are no opposed. Wait, I thought of you waiting. Okay. All right. Okay, learn the code. Okay. Okay, so we're just going to pause for a second. We have a technical problem, but we also have a change. So you have on your desk a memorandum, Planning and Development Department, Planning Committee memorandum that just makes a comment about the wording in that. So, okay. Okay, so item P122-19, Planner 2, Madison Etzel, and Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble. Re-report number PD-177-19, recommendation report 723345, Ontario Inc. Skyway Fertilizer. And so I think it does, the report does reference that we keep saying that, but that's the old name that it was known by, so we'll continue with that for now. Dash 6254 Skyway Road Site Plan Authorizing Bylaw, file number 2100-016-19. So the recommendation is that report PD-177-19 regarding Skyway Fertilizer, again, change 6254 Skyway Road Site Plan Authorizing Bylaw, file number 2100-016-19, dated November 11th, 2019, be received, and that a bylaw be passed to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign a site plan agreement with, and this is a numbered company, 723345 Ontario Inc., care of Greg Hart, Skyway Fertilizer, the Bank of Montreal, and the Township of West Lincoln, once all site plan details are substantially completed. So I need a mover for that recommendation, please. Mayor Bilsma. And a seconder. Councillor Rayner. Are there any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And none are opposed. That motion carries. Okay. Item P123-19, Planner 2, Madison Etzel, and Director of Planning and Building, Brian Treble. Re-report number PD-182-19, which is an... Whoops. Oh, we have an amendment. Okay. 4. Oh, the Skyway one. Okay. All right, so we're backing up because we have an amendment put in. So... Okay, so what we need is a mover and a seconder, essentially to delete any reference to Skyway Fertilizer. So I'm going to read that again. So the amendment is that report PD-177-19 regarding Skyway Fertilizer, 6254 Skyway Road Site Plan Authorizing Bylaw, file number 2100-016-19, dated November 11th, 2019, be amended to delete any reference to Skyway Fertilizer and instead refer to 723345 Ontario Inc., including any attachments to this report. So we need somebody to move that, please. Councillor Riley. And a second at Councillor Rayner. Okay, so I'll call a vote again on the amendment, please. All those in favor? And that motion carries. Okay, thank you. All right, so now we will move on then to the next one. Again, this is an information report. So again, report number PD-182-19, an information report, read the Wellandport Streetscape Master Plan Update and Public Information Center. So the recommendation is that report PD-182-19 regarding the information report, Wellandport Streetscape Master Plan Update, Public Information Center, dated November 11th, 2019, be received for information purposes. So I still need a mover, please. Mayor Bylsma, and a seconder, Councillor Riley. Are there any questions or comments?
Madam Chair, just
Yeah, please, Mr. Treble.
If I may, the session was held last week in Wellandport. It started with a walk along the main street, and it was very well received. The community was very happy that we were there and that we were giving them an opportunity to have input into the future improvements on that road. So kudos to council for giving authority for staff to do that work. I think it's going to be well received, and they're going to be quite happy when we're done.
Okay. There have been a lot of questions and about what's happening with that, so I'm very pleased too to see that something is finally moving in the right direction. Anything further? Okay. So that we did have a recommendation anyway that we received that, so I'm going to still call for a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Okay, so item P124-19, Director of Planning and Building Brian Treble, report number PD-055-19, a recommendation report, the establishment of 2 required committees to implement a master community plan, an MCP, and sub-watershed study, SWS, including a technical advisory committee and a coordination committee. So the recommendation is 1, that report PD-055-19 regarding recommendation report, establishment of 2 required committees to implement the Master Community Plan, or MCP, and Sub-Watershed Study, SWS, including a technical advisory committee and a coordination committee dated November 11, 2019, be received, and 2, that a technical advisory committee and the coordination committee be established as outlined in the attached terms of reference, and 3, that the terms of reference as found attached to this report be endorsed as terms of reference for the operation of each committee, and 4, that the activities of each committee be reported to this committee and council from time to time with recommendations being presented for ratification as required. So I need a mover for that, please. Councillor Riley, and a seconder. Mayor Bylsma. Okay, are there any questions or comments? Mr. Treble, did you wish to speak to this at all?
Only, I guess, to say that this is a key piece of the puzzle to help keep the urban boundary process moving. It allows for coordination and steering to happen with an advisory committee that includes the landowners, or a representative of the landowners that are paying for the process, so that there's some buy-in as part of that process. The technical committee is going to be much more the experts, not necessarily the landowners, but it's all to help sort of keep things moving. And with the assistance of the, what did we call him? The Richard Van de Zand, who's going to be the project manager for us. I think this will be very helpful to get moving fast and be up and running, so that when the weather is appropriate, we can get out and do the site work that needs to be done.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Okay, all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. And that motion carries. Okay. Under other business, item P125-19 is a verbal update from Director of Planning and Building Brian Treble, re the Ontario Building Officials Association, modernizing and transforming building service delivery. Mr. Treble, you're on again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like with just about every other topic, this government is reviewing the Building Code Act and making some changes. There was an introductory presentation on the proposed changes at the Building Officials Conference that I attended in Collingwood back at the 1st of October. That was sort of when the study was launched and the comment period opened. There's a comment period that's open until the end of November. I've reached out to the province and indicated that we're not going to have comments in, I think it's November 25th. We're not going to have comments in by then. We'll have some before this committee in December and have comments in by then. They've indicated that that is fine. So I'm going to work towards having a written report for your deliberation in December. there's a lot of changes that are being talked about that are pretty standard things. They're just simply looking at the building code education process and what training is required, and is the training that's being offered now working, and are there other ways to do it. The interesting thing is there's really not a college or university that offers a program that you come out and you're a building official. You end up sort of going through, architecture or surveying or something of that nature, and then getting an interest in this field, and then going off to some college or some courses that George Brown College offers through the Ontario Building Association. One of the pieces that I found interesting in the report was the fact that some of the changes have to be reviewed with respect to the replacement for NAFTA, whatever that's called now. So, compliance with, I guess, international responsibilities is a piece of the puzzle that has to be evaluated. The other thing that they are trying to do is align with a national building code that exists. So right now Ontario has its own code, and it really has nothing to do with the national code. But I think this probably has something to do with this NAFTA discussion as well. There's a need to align with sort of national standards. The two pieces that appear to be probably the most controversial, if I can call them that, CIO Bev and I were, I'm getting tired for some reason. We were at a session last week talking about shared services, and it's pretty clear that amongst the building officials that they've got a little bit of concern with a couple of thoughts. One that's been floated by the province is the fact that, and I think it's either British Columbia or Victoria, somewhere out in BC, there's a provision that allows for the building industry to employ their own inspector, and then that inspector inspects their own work. Yeah, that's kind of most people's reaction. The piece of the puzzle that makes it even worse, if I can call it that, is the fact that we still issue a building permit and we still assume the liability, but they do the inspections. Doesn't all add up in my mind. So that's one that's causing a little bit of angst in the industry, and something I'm exploring before I put together a recommendation to you guys. The other one that is being floated by the province in I guess the efforts to tighten the purse strings, the province is floating the idea of running the building department of the province, if I can call it that, sort of as its own separate entity, and collecting funds from each municipality based on the value of permits issued or the value of construction, or based on some number. A certain percentage of that goes to the province to fund this new organization. And like the percent is something like 0.016% or something. It's a very small number, but the concept is that it'll be funded by building permit revenues, and they're talking somehow collecting $6 million to make this happen. So that whole piece is new and kind of nebulous still. It's not clear exactly what this organization would look like or how it would operate. But I guess back in the day, you used to be able to call the ministry and get guidance. Whether you were a developer or you were a CBO, you could call the ministry and they'd be there to help you interpret what's going on, or interpret the act, or figure out how it should apply in a certain case. And it's getting very tough to find people that actually are there to do that anymore. So they're trying to suggest that this would be a way to go back to providing a service to the development industry and providing advice or opinion, pretty much always predicated with talk to your lawyer. But having said that, that's sort of a high-level understanding of some of the stuff I've seen, and we'll report back next month more formally.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions for Mr. Treble on that? Okay, so we're moving on then to item P126-19, which is an opportunity for members of committee to offer information about other business matters of an information nature. So, Councillor Cody, I'm going to start with you. No? Councillor Jonker? Mayor Billsman?
Thank you for the opportunity. I have a couple of things that I'd like to just bring to the council's attention. First of all, In the midst of that snowstorm on Monday, we had a Remembrance Day ceremony. This is the first time that it was held indoors at the Legion. It was crowded. Nevertheless, I think it worked. We hope that it's not a regular occurrence that we have a dumping of snow on Remembrance Day. Global warming be notwithstanding, I guess. So I'd like to thank the councillors that attended. Councillor Ganan, Councillor Dronker were in attendance that I could see, but I couldn't see everyone. I know that the Madam CAO was in attendance as well. And something that's happening this year is a vets dinner, and that'll be upcoming on Saturday, and I'll be attending that, and we'll see how that evening goes. I have an opportunity this Friday also to engage with West Lincoln Memorial Hospital. We have a meeting in the boardroom on Friday, and again, update. So I just wanted to highlight that these meetings happen quite often. Councillor Ganan is doing a fabulous job of representing our community as a liaison from the at the one level. But I work in concert with the CAOs and the mayors, and so sometimes we get updates from Mr. Aaron Levo with respect to HHS and the decisions being made with respect to the intermediate stage and shovels on the ground and all those kinds of things. So we're getting an update on Friday. So I just want to make council aware that that's going to take place. Yesterday I had an opportunity to meet our next door neighbor. I sat down with Mayor Eisenberger. The nature of the business had to do with respect to the NPCA, but I did bring greetings on behalf of West Lincoln, and so we've struck hands and made introductions, and so on a future basis, I think he had no issues with us as a neighbor. So thought
we are good neighbors.
We're good neighbors. We're pretty quiet and stick to ourselves. And then the final thing that. And it could have been said at our last council meeting, but I was remiss, maybe it was a little flummoxed, but we survived the amalgamation threat. And so I just wanted to say that while the status quo was maintained in general, there was a direction that we would continue to look for efficiencies. And again, I want to stress that those efficiencies were always being looked and sought after. For many, many years, we didn't need to be told. And but having said that, I know that work will continue. And I know that our Madam CAO is in constant contact with our neighbors to the south, north, and east to continue to look for efficiencies with regards to service delivery. And so I think that this is good for West Lincoln. Because we can continue to provide what I consider to be a high level of service for a very great value, and I thank the staff for their work in giving us information and putting before us the opportunities to gain data and to make our case in the portals that were given to us by the province to register our concerns and our desires. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Riley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple quick matters. One, on November 1st, Councillor Cody and myself were able to attend the Rap Encourage event for Jillian's Place, and sponsored by Penn Financial. It was a great evening, relatively short evening, wasn't a super lengthy evening by any means, but we enjoyed a pasta dinner and the company there, and then got to take part of that, and that was a very, like I said, lovely evening. As well, Mayor kind of already spoke about it, but after the last meeting, I kind of realized as well, I'm like, oh, we didn't talk about the outcome of the amalgamation, and I was definitely relieved to hear the comments from Minister Steve Clark in acknowledging that municipalities can continue to do what they've been doing and that they trust us to kind of do the governing that's required. I don't want to discredit anything that anybody's done, but I do think everything we did leading up to it contributed in some way, some form. I think it was good that we were able to stand up for our community. Whatever impact it had, we'll probably never know the gravity of it, but it definitely, never hurts to kind of make it loud and clear where you stand. And, given the outcome of the federal election even, I don't know if that had some weight of it or whatever, but regardless, we're very happy that they finally acknowledge that we are responsible enough to keep governing our communities. And so that was excellent news to hear, and I was actually surprised, even myself included, being like, oh man, none of us spoke about it. So it was just a busy evening, and it kind of slipped the radar. So other than that, I thought it's been pretty good. It's only been the first half of the month here, and I'm sure we'll have more to report at the end.
Okay. Councillor Rayner?
Thank you. Yes, I know it was a subject that wasn't talked about, but it was a nice thing to hear that. But by the same token, the way that the existing government is reversing a lot of things that they were going ahead with, it just fell in place that this would be another one of them that they're reconsidering because their popularity is waning, unlike what they thought the process would achieve. It's backfired, and it's actually caused some resentment with the federal party that was running, and they weren't too happy about Ontario, and the results proved it. So I think they're learning that the direction they were going in was not gaining the favor that they were looking for, and they're starting to retract and rethink things, and I think that's a positive. And I'm just grateful for the fact that they left it alone, because there's a lot of municipalities in the region of Niagara that are very special and different than a lot of municipalities, and they need proper representation in order to respect and look after the residents who live in those municipalities. And leaving us alone and allowing us to represent the people and knowing the area that we live in and being able to represent it, I think is a very important thing in order to maintain the enjoyment that people have in the municipalities in the region in which they live. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, everyone's spoken about everything. I'm going to come to you, Madam CAO. What would you like to say?
Please bear with me. I did attend a pretty important meeting today, so I thought I should share the information. The mayor and I were invited to a meeting that was organized by our MPP, Sam Oosterhoff, and they were facilitating a number of discussions across the province. The PA for Municipal Affairs, Jim McDonnell, and the PA for Labour, Jane McKeenan, we met in Pelham, and there were representatives from Niagara Falls, Grimsby, Lincoln, the region, Waynfleet, St. Catharines, Pelham, Welland. And we had a very open discussion for about an hour or so. Some of the topics that came up were sort of interesting, and issues around how to facilitate business and doing business within the province. But some of the issues that came up were a little bit different, like the arbitration system and the library systems and how they integrate with the municipal governance settings, cannabis, and the Minister of Health at the Canadian level and how they aren't assisting. So those sorts of issues, the continued request for support and commitment to the West Lincoln Memorial Hospital rebuild. Some of the things that the CAOs talked about were requests for some of the information that came out of that regional review process. What were some of the key trends that were coming up as they were doing their work across the regions and the counties? And so that was a request that we made to get some of that information that came out of the regional review. And then a big issue is that there is that $128 million modernization fund that we could have access to, but the deadlines are really, really tight. We just found out yesterday that we have to have a letter of intention by November 22nd to do a review of a service, and an application by December 6th. So I think if we could push for some extension on that, that would be a big help. For example, the regional CAOs have been meeting. We've been talking about areas that we could be doing service improvement, but we aren't even meeting until December 6th to talk about that. So we'll have to either push that ahead or ask for some extension. So it was a great opportunity. Thank you for letting me speak to you about it, and I will keep you posted as I learn more.
Okay, I'm very pleased to hear that you've asked questions about the report and what came out of it and what we can learn from that. I thought it was odd that all that time was spent gathering information and then it just dropped. We're not doing anything about that, but they didn't give feedback about the kinds of things that they did discover and what led to the decision to leave things alone. I think that's a valuable process, to give input and then to get information back in terms of what we should be doing and where we should be going.
I thought it was an efficient way of using that information that was gathered.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my only other, Mr. Treble, anything more, by the way, since you've had lots to say tonight?
I don't want to hold it up. You're right.
Okay, good.
January 10th, we have an LPAT case management conference, I think is what it's called, for development charges. And we believe January 28th appears to be a case management conference for the Gibson cannabis file. That one's not completely confirmed yet, but that's what it appears to be.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cooper, do you want to weigh in tonight? Okay, so I'm going to put on my teacher hat then and just tell you a little bit about Remembrance Day and what happened. And I was given the privilege of judging the poetry and the prose selections that the students submitted for a competition. And I just was extremely impressed with the thoughtful presentation, the things that went into it. They went from the extreme of somebody in the shoes of a soldier during World War II to somebody else talking to their great-grandparent about having lived in Holland during that war period, and just really, really extremely well done. And I just thought, hopefully some parent decides to look at this and says, okay, that was my kid, because I was really, really impressed. As a former teacher, it was an honor to look at their work. So thank you. And seeing nothing further, there are no confidential items. I haven't seen any new business brought up, so I'm going to adjourn this meeting at 9:17.